Good evening. Wow, that was loud. Hi, I'm Sue Kowalski. I work with Jen Walker team, and I'm the president of the Delray Business Association. The Delray Business Association is very proud to be sponsoring the first Alexandria debate. Thank you all for coming out for this between Mayor Allison Silberberg and Vice Mayor Justin Wilson. We have a lot of important issues in our city, specifically in our Delray community, so we look forward to hearing from the candidates and how they will address our concerns. It is my honor to turn the program over to our moderator, Julie Carey, who is the Northern Virginia Bureau Chief for NBC News 4 and has covered Northern Virginia since joining the station in 1992. She's covered the governor, the General Assembly, and every statewide election since 1993, and frequently moderates debates for elections across the region. We're also very proud that she resides right here in Alexandria. She is a T.C. Williams graduate, and we're so appreciative that she always has been so generous with her time and expertise in helping numerous nonprofits and organizations make this city the best that it can be. Julie, thank you for moderating this debate. It's all yours. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. I think my mic is on. Are we good? That introduction just means if I've covered every election since 1993, I'm officially old now. So we'll just go with that. I want to welcome everybody to the Democratic mayoral candidate debate hosted by the Delray Business Association. And for those of you who want an encore performance later, or who have friends who couldn't be here tonight, this is going to be live streamed and later archived by Zebra, and you'll be able to find that at thezebra.org. I'm going to ask you tonight, in the interest of getting in as many questions as possible and covering a lot of ground, to keep your applause to a minimum. But one of your chances for applause is coming up now as I introduce our two candidates for tonight. And I'm first going to welcome to the stage Mayor Allison Silberberg. And joining us on the stage now, Vice Mayor Justin Wilson. I want to begin by quickly going over the ground rules tonight. This debate, as you know, is going to last 90 minutes. We'll begin with a minute-and-a-half opening statement from each candidate, and then each will get a minute at the end of the debate to wrap things up. Our questions are chiefly focused on matters of concern to the Delray community, so if you came here with questions about the waterfront, you're in the wrong place tonight. The questions have been solicited from the Delray community, and they have not been reviewed by the candidates. A drawing was held to see which candidate would go first, and that will be Allison Silberberg. Each candidate will have a minute and 30 seconds to respond to questions, and then they will get an added 45-second rebuttal if they feel that's needed. And as a moderator, I reserve the right to ask follow-up questions. We have timekeepers sitting up front, and they have color-coded cards. They're going to help keep us on schedule tonight and to notify the candidates of the remaining time. And again, because we'd like to get to as many questions as possible, candidates, I'm going to be strict about enforcing time limits, so I hope I don't have to cut anybody off. And again, that request I have for the audience, I'll give you one more chance for applause at the end after those closing statements, but I think that'll allow us to get a lot of questions in tonight. So we will begin with opening statements, and Allison Silberberg will begin.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you all for being here, and our thanks to the Delray Business Association and Sue Kowalski and the board for organizing us, and thanks to Julie Carey, our moderator. I'm honored to serve as your mayor, and we're certainly blessed to be a city of great neighborhoods, and Delray is one of our great neighborhoods. In fact, I used to live right down the street on East Duncan Avenue for 3 years when I first moved to Alexandria in 1989. And as mayor, I believe we must protect our small town feel and sense of community, which Delray, of course, exemplifies very well. This is a city where we care about each other and where we believe in inclusiveness. And I'm proud to have initiated and drafted our city statement on inclusiveness, which the council, all of us signed, and it's posted all across our city. And inclusiveness is a top value in our city, of course. As mayor, I've been moving our city forward on a host of issues, ranging from addressing the sewer outfalls, finally, and to approving 2 new schools in 1 year, a first for Alexandria. Also adding affordable and workforce housing, and improving our transit, and protecting our environment. And I'm proud that we've tackled problems together and are getting things done. And I'm fighting for a livable Alexandria for all of us. So please vote for my re-election on June 12th so we can keep moving our city forward together. Thank you.
Justin?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Justin Wilson. I'm so proud to serve you on the City Council, and I'm proud to be seeking your Democratic nomination to be your next mayor. 17 years ago, I walked into this room as a brand new homeowner of Alexandria and went to my first Civic Association meeting. This morning, I walked down the hill and dropped my daughter off here for 4th grade. The trajectory of my civic involvement has gone through this building. A couple of years after I joined the Civic Association, I became president. As a president of a civic association here in Delray, I worked every day to improve involvement in our schools. As a member of council, I've worked to ensure the success of our kids, expanding early childhood education, improving after-school services, and meeting the opportunity of growing student enrollment. As a civic association president, I worked with our neighbors to improve our infrastructure here in Delray and trying to improve pedestrian safety on Mount Vernon Avenue. As a member of council, I built coalitions on the council to invest in our infrastructure, our roads, our sewers, our sidewalks, our municipal facilities, and even our broadband. As a president of the Civic Association so many years ago, I worked to partner with our small businesses to improve our economy here in this neighborhood. As a member on the City Council, I worked to build coalitions to ensure that our economy thrives long into the future, ensuring that we can weather the storm from reductions in federal spending. I'm running for mayor because I want to make sure Alexandria is a better place to live, work, and raise a family. I'm looking forward to your questions for this evening, and thank you so much to Julie and all the organizers for putting this together. So thank you.
And again, I want to urge you to give your applause a rest for a while, okay, so we can move through these questions. Undoubtedly, a lot of you walked here tonight, and you know that pedestrian safety continues to be a huge issue and a huge challenge for our city. In the city's 2005 small area plan for Delray, the #1 priority cited then was pedestrian lighting. Why has there been so little progress on this? And what would you do to expedite the creation of some lighted crosswalks? Justin, you answer this question first.
Yeah, as I talked about in my opening, I was a president here at the Civic Association and was president when we were working through the Mount Vernon Avenue plan, which included the need for pedestrian scale lighting. And the question's right. You know, we did identify a significant need for pedestrian scale lighting. One of the things that I think we've learned over the last several years is that when we approve these small area plans, we have to figure out a way to pay for the things that we put in those plans. And the plans that we've adopted in the last several years have included funding mechanisms. We didn't do that with the Mount Vernon Avenue plan or the Orlandria plan, but we laid out a whole vision of things that we needed to accomplish. A couple years ago, I put out a request for us to figure out how we can amend and update the Mount Vernon Avenue plan so that we can come up with funding mechanisms in the plan to make the infrastructure improvements occur. We're about to launch a strategic update of the Mount Vernon Avenue plan, which will allow us to look at how we can identify funding to make some of this occur. It's not just pedestrian scale lighting. We also need significant improvements on the pedestrian infrastructure on the avenue to make it safer. Mount Vernon Avenue is a dangerous street for pedestrians, a dangerous street for vehicles, and dangerous street for bikers and other folks. We have an opportunity, I think, to improve the safety of Mount Vernon Avenue, a community that is built around pedestrian scale and walkability. And I look forward to, over the next several years, implementing our Vision Zero plan, as well as some of our Complete Streets initiatives, including right here in Mount Vernon Avenue. So, thank you.
Okay. Well, about 6 months ago, we passed a Vision Zero plan, which included a whole host of policies to make it safer for pedestrians and for cyclists and for drivers, for all of us. But, you know, all of us know that pedestrians are really at high risk. And so many pedestrians in our community have been hit, including right down the street, one of our friends and neighbors at Mount Vernon Avenue and Glebe, a terrible tragedy. Lighting, just like they have in Old Town, those beautiful street lights, we should have those here in Delray, on our main street here in Delray. There is a plan. Carl Moritz, our planning director, is going to be looking at ways, looking at the whole host of issues, and I would firmly support putting in those lights, absolutely, and I think it would make it's very business friendly. It's also pedestrian safety oriented. So I think that when that happens, we should look at that. The other thing is that for many years, long before I got on council, it always made me wonder, why are there four-way stop signs throughout Old Town, but not in Delray? It doesn't make any sense to me. And so I've continued to push for that, and I think that we need to continue to look at that and push full steam ahead on that. It would make it safer for all. Thank you.
Justin, rebuttal if you have some. Let me take another crack at that a little more broadly. And Allison, you mentioned the death of Rose Cruz in December of 2016, which really impacted this community. Her death was the second at a stoplighted intersection in Alexandria that I've covered in which changes were only made after the fatality. And in both those cases, LPI, the leading pedestrian interval adjustments, were put in at those crossings to give pedestrians a head start in the crosswalk. Why does it seem in Alexandria these safety improvements come after tragedies? And how might you be more proactive? And Allison, this starts with you.
Well, I think that's a great question, and our transportation director, Jan Lambert, and I have certainly talked about that, and I think he's talked about it with the whole council. I think other intersections need to be looked at for that in advance of a tragedy. If there's anything we can do, it's not just that. We now have some of these orange strips down the middle of stop signs. You can see them. It adds a little reflection. It helps a driver see that they need to really come to a stop in terms of stop signs. But in terms of intersections with lights, absolutely, I think that we should add those in advance. But we need to. There has to be a traffic study, according to the transportation director, for anything we do now. But I'm absolutely very focused on pedestrian safety.
So you're absolutely right. I think I remember doing an interview with you, Julie, next to my job years ago after that death, and it was absolutely a tragedy. And I think this gets into a trade-off conversation for us as a community, and I'm hopeful that we can take this on. We have designed roads in our community for far too long, designed to move vehicles quickly, and in order to protect safety, we're going to have to be willing to accept that that is not our primary goal. I'll give you a couple examples. I think you mentioned the leading pedestrian interval and lights, and I think that's an important one. We have one right here next to the school. But we also need to look at rights on red. We put rights on red in this country in place as an energy-saving initiative in the 70s. And it does move traffic quickly, but it also makes intersections very, very dangerous around our city. And I've pushed for us to look at intersections around our city as part of our Vision Zero implementation and consider whether we want to make larger policy changes that really trade off moving vehicles quickly but improving pedestrian safety. I think it's a trade-off that is worth it to make, and it protects lives. And it's one, I think, if we communicate it to the public and make sure they understand why we're doing it, it's one that I think will enjoy the support of the community. But these are the kinds of discussions I think we need to have as we implement Vision Zero, broader policy trade-offs in order to protect safety.
Any rebuttal, Allison?
Well, less of a rebuttal, just an addendum, and that is we're the third jurisdiction in the region to have a Vision Zero plan. And I'm very proud of that the whole council and I were able to get that achieved. So that's all part of that initiative. And it's really important. And actually what I hope is that the whole region will adopt it, not just Alexandria, Montgomery County, and DC. That would help us. And so that's a very important step towards safety for all.
Just a quick follow-up on my part, 15 seconds each of you. As mayor, where would pedestrian safety rank as a priority? Near the very top, somewhere in the middle? Real quick, each of you.
Public safety rank?
Where would pedestrian safety rank among your priorities? Justin,
sure,
yes.
go ahead.
It's absolutely one of our highest priorities around our community. It's one that we've made significant investments in the police department over the last several years to address, and one that we've made significant infrastructure investments. That's been a big push for me on the city council, is to invest in our infrastructure, and investing in our pedestrian infrastructure is a very important part of that.
And just to add to that, all of us on the council actually are committed to this. And we we have a number of intersections that we've been looking at and studying. The worst one, frankly, is at Quaker and Duke and Taylor Run and Duke. We know that. And so we've made adjustments to those two intersections. We're not waiting. We're pushing full steam ahead.
Another public safety issue, and this question will start with you, Justin. The Alexandria Fire Department recently moved the only EMS ambulance unit in Delray over to Potomac Yard, and community groups complain that they were really left in the dark about this. Should they have been consulted more in advance, and do you support moving that ambulance back to the Delray station?
Who's going first? Me?
Justin.
Okay. One of the things that we have tried to get out of from the city council perspective is having the city council make public safety decisions. We had been in a situation where the council was making decisions about where fire apparatus should go in our community, and I think that's a bad practice. I'm not a firefighter. I don't know how to improve and optimize fire response. Our fire chief does. That all being said, I think we absolutely need to have an open and transparent process, and the fire department needs to, and any public agency needs to consult with the public before any changes were made. As I understand the ambulance move that serves my home here at 202, the change was made in the fire chief's discretion. He believes that it will improve response times around the entirety of the neighborhood. We have a jurisdictional blind mutual aid response for fire and EMS services in this area. Where I live, we're just as likely to get a fire or an ambulance coming from Windsor as I am from the Airports Authority, as I am from Arlington County. And so I think I give great deference to our public safety professionals who make these decisions day in and day out about the best way to keep our community safe. But obviously we should consult with the community and make sure there's full transparency in those decisions.
Well, I wish that certainly while I acknowledge and honor Chief Dubé's expertise, and he's a wonderful fire chief, I also think that it would have been helpful if there had been more community input. Most calls are not for fires today, as most of us know. They're for ambulances. And minutes or really seconds matter for you or a loved one. And I know that Chief Dubé is fully committed to getting ambulances or fire trucks everywhere he needs to get them. And they've done it, they've moved things around based on data. Having said that, I know and we know that the medic unit or the ambulance was promised to stay at the station on Windsor. And this is 13 years ago, obviously predates me, but it does seem to me that this is something that we can look at. It takes time to get across Jeff Davis Highway. It would take some time to get from Jeff Davis, on the other side of Jeff Davis Highway, even with the lights being changed and all the sirens, it would take some time to get to a certain part of Delray. And it does make sense, just intellectually, it's reasonable to have it stay at Windsor if possible. So I'd love us to look at that again and have more community input. Thank you.
So is that a yes, that you do support the movement of it back to Delray, or still a let's wait and see?
I think it would make sense for us. Yes, I would definitely think that would make sense, and I think the neighbors have really spoken. Mm-hmm. And so I wish there were, I certainly respect Chief Dubé's opinion and expertise, but I also think having more community input would have been helpful, and it was promised 13 years ago.
Justin, any rebuttal? Okay. I mentioned the 2005 small area plan earlier, and another top priority was opening up shared parking in Delray's underused parking lots. What are your thoughts about whether that should be pursued, and if so, how it could be done, since we know finding parking is tough? Allison, start on this one.
Right. There is a parking lot near DCHS or under DCHS off of Mount Vernon, and I think we should definitely pursue that in terms of a shared parking agreement. But of course, we should also pursue shared parking all across the city, anywhere that's possible, especially in Delray and Old Town, where parking is at a minimum. There were 2 votes recently in the last year regarding parking and the requirements for new commercial and new residential developments. And I voted to insist that we keep the requirements as is. I certainly support mass transit. I certainly think that we need to increase our bus transit, and we are increasing our metro transit options, as you know, about Potomac Yard, coming in about late 21, early 22. But having said that, people do still drive, and it's anti-business not to provide adequate parking. And so I would encourage us to rethink that. I voted to encourage us not to restrict, not to change the parking requirements for commercial and residential developments so that there is sufficient parking for residents as well as for businesses. Thank you.
Oops. The question was about shared parking. Unfortunately, one of the consequences of the mayor's vote, if it had prevailed, is that it would have not facilitated shared parking. One of the key components of the commercial parking standard change the mayor voted against, and she was the sole vote, was actually to facilitate shared parking arrangements in our city, not just in Delray, but throughout our community. Today, right now, there's a significant amount of red tape that's involved with bringing together two uses in order to share that parking and be the most efficient about using parking, where you have a daytime office use and you have a nighttime restaurant or retail use. Today, it's very hard to make that happen. One of the benefits of the package that was passed by the council to make changes to our commercial parking standards was actually to facilitate that and make it so that staff administratively can work with parking lot owners and businesses to share that parking and more efficiently use it, which ultimately eases the burden of parking congestion in our neighborhoods.
Allison, rebuttal?
Just quickly, I think we should be seeking shared parking arrangements anyway, always. So that's number one. Second, so we didn't need that vote in order to do that. And I think it bears remembering that in one decade, the number of registered cars in our city has increased 18%. And so people are still driving. We do want to encourage mass transit. We do have the free trolley in Old Town that's very successful. We do have a wonderful dash bus service, but we have to continue to think about this other option, that people are still driving, and if they can't find parking, they'll go elsewhere. Or they'll just, if they're shopping, they'll shop online. If they're frustrated with that aspect of coming here. And the number one thing with, oops, my time is up.
Time is
so
up.
I'm gonna
Well
end.
done.
Thank you.
It would not be a debate in Northern Virginia if we didn't talk about traffic for a little while. Everybody here knows at times in the afternoon rush, parts of Alexandria really get gridlocked. We still have a lot of streets that are kind of in rough and bumpy shape. The Transportation Improvement Program begun in 2012 with its 2% on the property tax rate. That was intended to be used for local projects, but right now the lion's share is going to operating expenses and to WMATA. So what's going on with that, and what would you do to redirect those funds to local projects? Justin?
This is an issue I've been very outspoken on, that I do believe we have redirected the use of the Transportation Improvement Program dollars that we promised the community would be used for new transit initiatives in order to fund general upkeep of Metro. And I think that's inappropriate. And I've said that repeatedly and during our budget process. And I've put together coalitions on the council in order to restore some of that when necessary. Unfortunately, obviously, we've seen increased funding challenges for Metro, and in a very low revenue growth environment, it's been a challenge to find those resources. But I think raiding our Transportation Improvement Program funds really is inappropriate. It's an inappropriate use of those funds. We went to the community. I was not on council then, but we went to the community and said that these funds were going to be used to expand new transit. As part of the funds that we use to set up the dedicated transitway, and we'll do the dedicated transitway on the west end of the city as well. And to expand Dash Bus around our city. But the fact that we've crowded out those initiatives in order to fund Metro has really left the piggy bank empty, unfortunately, from those dollars. And I think we have a choice. We either need to protect that investment, or we need to release the reservation of those funds and make those funds general fund dollars. So I think in the end, I would like to see us expand our transportation investment, our transit investment. That's been a big focus of mine. But the tip is not the way to do it. Thank you.
Oh, she had to use the
First
bell.
one to get the bell. There we go.
Allison, your response.
That's a cowbell, really.
I like this thing.
All right, thanks, Julie. Okay, the bell kind of threw me off here. All right, traffic. All right. I do think that we need to continue to invest in transit all across the board. Now, if you're in a city like New York, of course, the buses come by pretty rapidly. So if you miss one, you just catch the next one. Here in Alexandria, I can't say enough great things about Dash. I used to ride it every morning to K Street before I became the mayor, and it was so on time. The bus driver, if they saw you sort of rushing to the bus stop, they would wait and just give you a signal like don't run in your heels or whatever. And it just was amazing. And buses were really clean. So anything we can do to give more funds to Dash and keep our rates low in terms of how much it costs to ride each time, I think that's really important, because we want to keep it so low that people don't think twice about riding it. So yes, we should reshift our funds, if possible, towards Dash, and really the trolley's part of Dash. And clearly, we're making great strides in terms of I just want to segue to dedicated funding for WMATA. This is 40 years in the making, and we should all be very proud that we finally have achieved it.
Any rebuttal, Justin?
Well, it is true that we finally achieved at the state level dedicated funding for WMATA, but unfortunately it came at a great cost. It came with the state rating, the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority funds that we use to do local projects here in the city. And so you couple that with the Metro funds crowding out our transportation improvement program, and you couple that with what the state has now done with our MVTA dollars, and you have a situation where the local transit funding that this city relies on, and really our entire region relies on, is being crowded out significantly. And I think this is a major challenge for us over these next few years. I've been a daily transit rider for 17 years, bike and transit into my day job in the district, and we, bless you, we have to work to expand mass transit throughout this community.
Allison, you start this next question. Small business, as everybody knows, really shapes the character of the Delray community. What, as mayor, would you do additionally to make sure that small business not only survives but thrives in Delray?
Well, first of all, I think we need to continue to look at our permitting process and make sure it's as streamlined as possible so that businesses can get going quickly. Second, I think that we need to look at parking. When I met with leading restaurant owners about 6 or 8 months ago, and I said, what are your top 3 problems? What would you like to see change? And they all said, actually, our top problem is parking. Even a major restaurant near the Braddock Metro said, the top question is parking. Where's parking? And that really surprised me, frankly. But they said overwhelmingly that's what happens. So I think that while we want to encourage mass transit, again, parking is an issue for them, and we need to look at the shared parking options across the city. We need to have a Shop Local Alexandria initiative, and I was so thrilled to hear that the Old Town Boutique District came up with a little poster that's going to be posted all across the city in shop windows, and I'm meeting with them later this week or next week. So it's a tremendous step forward. We need to do everything we can to help our businesses be successful and to thrive. And if I'm reelected, I will continue to work hard on that.
So the success of our small businesses in this community is really the lifeblood of this neighborhood. My focus on the council around expanding small business has been working, first of all, to cut the red tape and make it easier for small businesses to open. I was proud to shepherd through the council a package of small business zoning reforms that unfortunately the mayor was the only member of the council to vote against. I think that was a good set of initiatives to make it easier for small businesses to open up. When a small business has an idea and financing, every day is money while they're waiting to open up. And we took out a lot of the public process that involves planning commission and council, and set a very clear set of checklist items for small businesses that if they meet them, they can get open, and the staff can administratively approve that. And I think that was a good move. I think we still have more to do in our zoning code. Retail is changing. And we have a very stringent set of zoning codes in our city that are really tied around business the way it existed long ago, and it needs a modernization. Fairfax County is doing a pretty significant zoning modernization effort, and I think we need to do the same to make sure that our government adapts with the place that business is in now in this region, so that our retailers can compete against what is really an onslaught of online competition.
Allison, rebuttal?
Right. Well, I believe that we do need to streamline the process, but I also believe that we need the public's input. And so by putting through those zoning reforms, with all due respect, it reduced the amount of the community input. And so if you have a new entity right near your home or even near your business that's going to have a negative impact, then after the fact, after it's put through without community input, then it's up to the community or you alone to go through the process of speaking up. And I think that really the onus is on all of us in city government to make sure that the community is heard in advance of such a decision. And then there are conditions applied to all these approvals, and we'll get to that soon enough. The time is, I don't want the cowbell.
Let's talk about, let's stick with business for a minute longer, and Justin, this will start with you. But I think there's definitely a perception in Alexandria, or a perception inside, outside Alexandria, that it's tough to do business here. What are some other things you would do specifically to change that perception?
Well, it is, and I think some of the things the mayor just talked about and I talked about are part of the reason it's difficult. So again, the small business zoning reforms, what they did was they provided a set of very clear criteria that had community support and set up a scenario where neighbors were notified, and if they had an opportunity to, if they voiced concerns, these things would be docketed for public review. So I think we built those protections into that package, and I think that's important. But shifting to your question and kind of what we need to do, I think part of our focus needs to be around business attraction and bringing people to our community. I think we have cut, unfortunately, over recent years some of our regional marketing efforts, and we get a ton of business from within the region. And I think we have an opportunity at the city government level, working with our partners in Visit Alexandria, to expand some of our regional marketing to bring those visitors from around this area. You know, Delray is a place where we get a fair amount of regional traffic in our businesses, and making sure that we market and sell Delray as a community where you want to visit is an important thing for government to do, an important thing for Visit Alexandria to do. Those investments pay off for the taxpayers and pay off for our community.
Well, I think we need a vision for small business, and part of that is to incentivize the small business world. Clearly, we have a great set of unique shops throughout the city, wonderful restaurants, and we want to build upon that so that people come and have a unique experience here. That's what people are looking for, to walk and have a unique experience. We can also be a hub for innovation, building upon the National Science Foundation and the PTO building, where we incentivize to bring businesses that are focused on health tech, medical research, science. This is the future's here, and we're on the cut, we're right there, and we need to bring them on in. But I think that incentivizing and coming up with a package, just as we frankly incentivized NSF. I don't think we should incentivize across the board per se, but I do think that we should be more proactive as a city. And as far as small businesses, anything that we can do to help them, I hope that they, this is the DRBA after all, I hope that you all will also reach out to us. Our doors are always open, and we need to do more for the business community, absolutely. Thank you.
Before I turn to the rebuttal, is there a specific initiative that in a second term you would launch in order to do what you're suggesting?
I'm saying that we should have a program that incentivizes small business to come here. Incentives, and we do that for we did that for NSF. We've done that for a few other entities. It's public information, and I think we should do that. I also think that we should be marketing ourselves as an innovation hub, meaning that we're attracting. You want to be where other businesses are in your field, and so the National Science Foundation is here and PTO, and so we need to bring in more firms that are focused on health tech, medical research, and science. This is huge business, and the whole Northern Virginia region is really going towards that direction.
Justin, do you have a
I
response?
feel like a horse race should be starting now. We should get going.
The greyhounds are taking off.
I want to give you a couple examples of what I'm talking about when I talk about how we have a posture here that I think contributes to the bad reputation we have as business friendly. Myself and Councilman Smedberg are, as we joke, the two last members of council that would ever get a tattoo. But we actually had a very over-regulatory posture in our zoning code relating to tattoo parlors. People pay $5,000 for tattoos now. This is like a salon experience. And so we reformed our code to make it easier for these types of tattoo parlors to come here to the city. We also did the same thing with massage. The city had a regulatory section of our zoning code that read like a bad romance novel as it relates to massage parlors, and we changed that to make it more friendly.
We don't need the cowbell. I want to turn to the issue of affordable housing, and that prompted more questions from the community than anything else we heard about when we were soliciting thoughts. I want to break it into several questions, though, and we'll talk about the meals tax hike in just a moment. But I want to start first by asking about just property taxes in general for homeowners. High property taxes, along with those climbing sewer fees, it really threatens to drive out some homeowners, not only retirees, but people who've been in the community for a long time. Now, we know there will be no property tax hike this year. Imagine that in an election year. But people fear that next year is going to be a makeup year. So what, if elected mayor, can you promise to homeowners about keeping property taxes under control? And again, this starts with you, Allison.
Okay. Well, each year we start with the budget guidance, and as mayor, I have asked, actually, not just this past fall, but I asked the city manager before that I thought we should say we should hold the line on taxes. I do think that the property tax rate has, well, last year, as many of you know, let me just go ahead and address this directly. Last year, I fully supported the city manager's proposed budget. I thought it was reasonable and actually very proactive. I think, and it also met 99% of what the school superintendent had requested for our school needs. So I'm fully committed to our schools, and I've mentored, tutored, and taught, and I think the schools need our help, and we have increased the budgets tremendously in the past couple years. But what I couldn't support is the historic tax hike initiated by my colleague, Vice Mayor Wilson, and with all due respect, but I just felt that clearly we should support, and I urged my colleagues on the council to support the city manager's proposed budget, which also actually had a 2.7 cent tax rate increase, which is pretty significant.
Okay. Time's up. We'll chance for rebuttal in a minute. Justin?
So my approach to the budget on every of the now 8 budgets that I've been a part of on the city council has been the same, which is holding the line on the operating side, but investing in our infrastructure. We have, going into 2 years ago, we had $500 million of unfunded capital initiatives. Every year that we delay infrastructure investment, those costs escalate by 5%. The city borrows at a rate about 2%. So every year that we delay those, we are setting a trap, a fiscal trap for the taxpayers of the future. And so my view has always been that we should hold the line on the operating side. And in fact, over the last decade, when adjusted for inflation, operating spending in the city has grown by 0.3%. That's over a decade. But we have made capital investments, and I'm very proud of those capital investments because I think they lower taxes in the future, they help increase our economic growth, they attract businesses, and they also help us provide the services that the residents of this community demand. Alexandria has the 4th fastest growing school system in the Commonwealth of Virginia over the last decade. Every single year, we add the equivalent of Charles Barrett Elementary, Maury Elementary, every single year. My view was we should be proactive and get ahead of that and try to catch up with increasing student enrollment. And the fact is, I'm proud of that package last year. The mayor not only did not vote for that, did not vote for providing resources for George Mason Elementary and Cora Kelly Elementary, but she didn't offer an alternative. And I think that's what leadership demands.
Rebuttal? Rebuttal? I want to ask you, too, please, to refrain on the applause until we get to the end, so we can move along.
Well, actually, I fully supported the city manager's proposed budget, which met the school superintendent's request. And that is very important to hear. So, and also, I'm proud of the capital investments we've made. And we have increased the money towards the schools really significantly and voted for 2 new schools, which we approved just last year. That's a first for our city. We should all be very proud of that on the council. Of course, we need to invest in our future, but also you don't just put a budget to the side and say it's going to be for unspecified needs, and that's what the 5.7 did. Unspecified needs, future. We're going to discuss it later.
There goes a question. You already know the statistics on affordable rental housing in this community. 16,000 units lost since 2000. At the same time, we've seen some rents double. Now a 1% increase in the meals tax has been all but approved over the fierce objection of restaurant owners. The two of you have differed somewhat and your positions have shifted somewhat, so I want to pin this down tonight. We'll start with you, Justin. What do you support and why, and how do you plan to vote?
So I've strongly supported increasing funding for affordable housing throughout every budget I've been a part of. I disagree with the proposal that's on the table. I don't think this is the appropriate mechanism to raise money for affordable housing, and I've offered alternatives throughout this process, and as well as in previous years. It's also important to note that once we have the funds for affordable housing, and as I said, I don't support what's on the table right now, but once we have funds for affordable housing, we have to approve the projects. And this is where, unfortunately, I think there's a real difference in this campaign. The mayor voted against Ramsey Homes, which added 53 units of affordable housing. That delayed that project by a year, cost us $1 million of affordable housing dollars. The mayor voted against Jackson Crossing here on East Reed, then changed her mind and voted for it. The mayor voted against St. James Plaza. The mayor voted against the largest developer contribution to affordable housing in our city's history in the Burgard plan. And the mayor voted against parking standards, which provided one of the largest financial incentives for affordable housing development in our community. So I think you have to not only find the resources to create affordable housing, you have to build the political support in order to sustain affordable housing, to ensure that my kids and our kids and the kids that they go to school with can come back to this community and buy their first home here like I was able to do.
Awesome.
Okay, well, first of all, with all due respect, that's really a perversion of my record, so let me just set the record straight. Ramsey Homes came forward, we won't have enough time for this, but Ramsey Homes came forward and had a strong pushback from the community. They were lawyered up. The historic preservationist community was also up in arms. So yes, I voted no. And then I worked out a compromise with both parties, and they dropped their lawsuit. They were prepared to go forward. That would have really jammed up the works and cost us money. We know what things like that cost us when the community sues. Jackson Crossing, I voted against originally because of the parking. The neighborhoods rose up about the parking. And yes, I did change my vote. St. James, there was a pool that was projected to go between the two buildings, the regular market rate building and the affordable housing building. And it was unfair. And two of us, Councilman Chapman and I, voted against it. And then they changed their mind about the pool. There is no pool now. It should have been a shared amenity from the beginning. That was wrong. It was like a pour door issue. Beauregard plan, I voted against it because it was going to lose affordable housing units. Yes, 800 or so committed, but we were going to lose about 2,400. That's wrong. That's a lot of people in our community. I'm fully committed to dedicated funding for the Affordable Housing Fund. My colleague, frankly, has said that he's not for dedicated funding for the Affordable Housing Fund, and what he put forward just 2 days ago with the council
We'll keep
is...
talking about this. Your time's up, right?
Okay.
We'll bounce back to this. So, Justin, you say you're opposed to what's on the table right now, so what funding mechanism would you use?
So what I've said throughout this process is, first of all, we should budget for affordable housing development in our capital improvement program. We've not done that. That's in the proposal that's actually about to pass, and I think that's a good thing. That was my suggestion to do. Affordable housing is infrastructure, and so I believe we should use general fund funding sources to fund affordable housing. The mayor's right, I am opposed to dedicated funding for affordable housing. I'm also opposed to dedicated funding for anything. I don't think the tool of using advanced revenue dedication is a good tool for the city to use. I think it perverts our budget process. I think we need to elect people that support this, support affordable housing development, and then budget the funds for it. And that's what I've tried to do throughout my time on the city council. But I think it's important, and I have to go back to these projects because I think it's important. Ramsey Homes is a perfect example. I worked to build that coalition.
Let's come back to
she
that.
voted for the same project. So.
We're out of time there. I want to stick with this a minute longer, though. So, Allison, what funding mechanism do you support? Are you going to be voting against the meals tax hike?
Well, let's just say, so you say you're against dedicated funding for the Affordable Housing Fund, but you're for dedicated funding for transit. So really, you are sometimes for, with all due respect, dedicated funding for some things. But let's move forward to the affordable housing. If it's not dedicated funding for the Affordable Housing Fund, it won't make it. It won't make it. It's kind of like having a 5-year-old play basketball with college kids. They're not going to make it. It's just unfair. And so what we do, we've said that affordable housing is a top priority and a value of our community, then we should dedicate some funding to the Affordable Housing Fund and protect it. As far as the meals tax, I put forward an alternative, and I urged my colleagues to support it. It was rounding up for affordable housing. It didn't get support, so we moved forward. There were two proposals, the Vice Mayor's meals tax proposal and Councilman Bailey's. And Vice Mayor Wilson's did not have would not put it towards dedicated funding for the Affordable Housing Fund, and Councilman Bailey's would. So that
let me ask about this just kind of from a philosophical point of view. Why is it fair to subject a certain business sector to an added tax rather than taking the approach that, for instance, Fairfax County has by adding a penny on the dollar for affordable housing? Is that, and Allison, I want you to start with this.
Well, and then, so just to back up, I put forward a proposal in the beginning of the process that was rounding up for affordable housing, essentially similar to a voluntary contribution. That didn't get support, but then Monday night at the final ad delete, I suggested that we turn to the city manager and put it in the budget guidance that we should ensure that the equivalent of $4.75 million, really the meals tax money, that could be found in the budget, and that he would have to find that. That's so we would insist that he would find that in the budget, if you will, that it was a top priority. And he finds it for other things, and then we would have to look at things that we would have to cut or defer in order to make that possible. That's what we should be doing, frankly. We should be cutting elsewhere and prioritizing. Budgets are about priorities and prioritizing our values. So I think that that's what we should be doing and looking ahead. In the meantime, I had a choice between a meals tax that would go to dedicated funding for the Affordable Housing Fund, or would go, as the Vice Mayor wanted, frankly, to unspecified, the general fund. And to me, that wasn't a good choice. He also, frankly, put forward in the ad delete to get rid of the 0.6 cents, which is all that's left of the dedicated funding for the Affordable Housing Fund. I'm drinking water.
Justin.
Well, first of all, that characterization of the proposal is not correct. Initially, I suggested that we fund it as a capital improvement program item, and we funded out of the general fund. When it became clear that there was 4 members that were supporting a dining tax increase, which I did not support, I offered an alternative where if we were going to increase the dining tax, we also pair it with a reduction in the real estate tax. And that's what the proposal was. All of the money that was being discussed in that proposal would have gone to affordable housing. That was my proposal. It would have gone to the capital improvement program for affordable housing, which is the way we budget for everything. And I think this is an interesting issue that's up here, because I think the mayor has said that if we don't dedicate funds for affordable housing, they cannot compete. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a high priority of our community, and don't sell it short. When affordable housing is in our budget process, when it's up against transportation and public safety and human services, I think we have budgeted money. Alexandria spent a lot of money on affordable housing, and we continue to do so. And so it can compete. And that's what I've argued, is that we should have a budget process where we collect the amount of resources that we need from the taxpayers, and we fund it on the priorities of our community. And affordable housing is one of those core priorities.
Would you advocate doing it the way Fairfax County does? If elected mayor next year, would you advocate adding a penny on the real estate tax for affordable housing? Or are you never going to be in favor of?
Well, I don't support dedicated of any revenue stream.
Okay.
But I think that out of our general fund revenues, whether it's real estate or other existing tax revenues, I think that's the way to fund affordable housing development. I think that's the way to do it. I also would encourage us that money is actually one of the weakest tools that the city has to create affordable housing. Our land use authority is the most powerful tool we have. I was proud to work with Councilman Chapman to expand our density bonus program in the city that helps increase affordable housing that comes from developers. And I think we did increase the developer contributions that we require. And we've worked throughout our city to expand how we use our zoning authority to create affordable housing. That's our most effective tool, and that's where we've created the most units over the years.
Allison, final word on this as rebuttal?
Well, back to the basic core thing. I'm fully committed to dedicated funding for the Affordable Housing Fund. It's really a yes or no question. I'm fully committed to it, and my colleague is not. And so with all due respect, that's what it comes down to. It can't compete against all the other issues when it comes to the budget. It's just not strong enough in a way, even though it's a core value here. It needs protection. It's kind of like your IRA. It's kind of like if you set up a trust fund for a kid going to college, you can't touch it. It should only go to affordable housing. That's why it's an affordable housing fund. And so we have to keep that. And I'm proud that in 2013, when it was removed, I and Councilman Chapman fought to bring it back. And it was not appropriate what was done in 2013. We got it back, and there it's been ever since. And to remove the 0.6 cents, as my colleague suggests, the 0.6 cents, that's all that's left of the dedicated funding. I think that was an unfortunate suggestion.
Let's talk about a project that could be a big economic boon for Alexandria, and that is the Potomac Yard Metro. But that timetable keeps shifting. So, Justin, we'll start with you. When should we expect to see the Potomac Yard Metro open, and how would you, if elected mayor, keep those plans moving?
Yeah, so first of all, I was proud in working with Councilman Kropika years ago to revive the Potomac Yard Metro. The Potomac Yard Metro project had been largely dead, and we amended our transportation master plan to bring that project back. That's not only a huge environmental initiative for our city, it's not only a huge transportation initiative for our city, but it's the largest economic development initiative our city has ever seen, and I think it's a very important project. Unfortunately, due to complexities in the project, complexities at Metro, complexities in the market for construction materials, the project has been elongated, and the schedule and the costs have gone up. We have put together a funding package that relies on all basically development dollars that come out of Potomac Yard from the development, as well as state dollars. And we recently voted to use some of our potential Dominion dollars to offset one of the special tax districts that is set up in the yard for the Metro. Metro is a vitally important project for the city. We are about to have a contractor under contract, and we now have a schedule that it would open in late 2021 potentially, and I think that's what we'll work very hard to keep on schedule and make sure that happens. WMATA is ultimately the procurement agency, and they're the ones who are managing that project, and I think it's important that we stay on them and make sure that project gets done on time and on budget.
Awesome.
Well, the Potomac Yard Metro idea is a long time coming, and I'm really proud of the fact that we as a team on council are seeing it through now. In my 2 years and 4 months and 2 days as mayor, but it's been a total team effort. And I serve on the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, where we were able to secure $69 million towards the project. And yes, costs went up, and then we sort of value engineered the project quite a bit. But it will open either in late 21 or early 22. That is the plan now. And actually, I will be seeking more funds through various means through the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, and I'm certainly proud of that role that I've played.
Any rebuttal on that, Justin? I think probably in a minute, we'll shorten up your answer time on this next one. I just want to get a sense from both of you, though, about what kind of density you envision around that new metro station, and do you think Alexandria is doing enough to maximize density at its metro station sites? And we'll start with you on this, Allison.
Well, we've had a long-standing policy for what's known as transit-oriented development, and all that means is that to have a lot of developments around the metro stops like any city would have. But as we do that, we also want to create community and make sure that there's some open space, of course, and that there's walkability and restaurants and shops. There was an issue in Potomac Yard where there was a building proposed across the street from some townhomes. It was in the master plan that said it would be about 36 units, I think 36 units exactly, and a relatively similar height. And it came back with a 380% density across the street from these townhomes, and a much higher height. So I think that we need to be very careful when we do this, but we need to be better at communicating it to the community, and certainly right near the metro, and that project was about a quarter mile away, but right near the metro, we need to have buildings that are where people can live in various tall buildings.
Time's up.
And all
Justin?
that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think absolutely we need to use our metro stations as where we focus the density. That's how I have approached development on the council, is making sure that the development that we do approve is where we have either current or contemplated transportation infrastructure. And next to our metro stations is the most important place. It's where we made investments decades ago into many of our metro stations, and we need to leverage that investment. The property that the mayor was making reference to that she voted against was one that also brought us 9 affordable housing units, some of the first ownership units we've brought into the city in a long time. And so, as we kind of close on that discussion earlier, I think it's important to be able to support those projects, and density around our metro stations enables not only economic success for our community, but also helps us create affordable housing. So, thank you.
Rebuttal?
Just quickly, there was a promise made to the existing community in the form of a master plan, and they did their homework, and it said that this is what it would be, and then they were surprised by what it became. And even the developer was surprised because they came forward with a project with 36 units, which is what it was supposed to be originally. I just like to say about Potomac Yard, that was wide open land, and I think that if I had been involved, and I wasn't involved at the time, but it was about 250 acres, and we could have set aside 10 or even 20% of that land and created a big rectangular park in the middle. And that would have added really, and that would have, thank you, and that would have added to the quality of life, not just for the residents there, but for all of the city. We could have had big events there. So that's unfortunate.
Justin, this next question goes to you first. Another big project on the horizon sooner is Dominion Energy's plan to construct an underground transmission line from the South Glebe substation to connect with the Pepco substation at Slater's Lane. I want to know how satisfied you are with the current plan, and what would your role be if elected mayor to ensure that the promises are kept for sparing trees and finding alternative rec opportunities while this whole area is torn up?
Yeah, this is it's a frustrating project because mostly frustrating because of the timing. I think we had an opportunity, obviously, before Potomac Yard developed, where this would have been a lot easier. Now it's an existing neighborhood, and this proposal would cut through an existing neighborhood and disrupt the quality of life for at least some period of time and potentially permanently. And so it's obviously something we have to take very cautiously and ensure that we get the maximum value for our community, and then ensure that the value that we do get is used to invest in our neighborhood, certainly the impacted neighborhoods, as well as ease the burden of that project. I am. We're still very much in progress on this issue and working through the routing and what the city's response is going to be, and working through potentially the upcoming State Corporation Commission process. It is a complex effort along with Dominion, but that's going to be my focus, is making sure that we get the maximum value for our community and the least disruption of quality of life.
Well, this has been controversial since the beginning, and it came forward a number of years ago when I was vice mayor, and immediately I spoke up and said, well, this is going to have a huge negative impact on our community. And a stakeholders group was formed by the mayor and the council at that time, of which I was one. And so this KV line by Dominion has been working with the stakeholders group. One of their partners or employees said in a meeting, it was heard by all, that it was really to help support originally all the needs going south that were coming from the south in Loudoun County, all these data centers. That was not pleasant to hear. We are here to protect our city, our neighborhoods, and now they have the right to put it right down the middle of Route 1, or there were these other options. And the stakeholders group, which was excellent, led by Jay Nesselrode, they chose the least objectionable option, and then that somehow was dropped. And so now we're facing it that it would go down the middle of Potomac Avenue. And the important thing is that it needs to be deep. It needs to be, I don't know how many feet, and then it needs to be covered so that any rays don't come out of the ground. And we're still researching all of that, and I welcome the community's input about that.
And I'm sorry, time's up.
Thank you.
Justin, a rebuttal? A response? So Alexandria gets a lot of best of honors, and we're proud of that. The city is growing. It's becoming more vibrant all the time. But some of our elementary schools continue to have low test scores, and as we know, Jefferson Houston is still unaccredited. What's your vision for how our school district can get to the place where it's viewed as having the same kind of reputation as our neighboring Arlington County and Fairfax County? And Allison, this begins with you.
Well, all of us need to ensure that all our children get a great education. Academic excellence is everything. I've taught and mentored and tutored students and love that time, and I visit the schools very often. I'm very proud of what I've seen. We need to focus, I think, working hand in glove even more with the school board and the school administration, getting everyone focused on academic excellence even more than they already are, I believe. Dr. Berlin, I must say, has done an excellent job, and we owe her a debt of gratitude as she has come in and really made a huge difference in a short time. And now Mignon Anthony is there helping at a senior level, of course, as COO, but also Greg Hudgings, when he comes in, will, I'm sure, do a great job. But we need to really support our teachers. We need to make sure that our students understand that they have a job to do. Their job is to be a student, so that when they go home, we expect them to study. We expect them to really learn their material and to help each other. I had a meeting yesterday with the George Washington PTA and the principal, Jesse Mazer, and had a good conversation about academic excellence and what their thoughts are on that. I think that all of us in the community need to help. I'm proud to have tutored 2 fourth graders at MacArthur Elementary for a year and helped them go from the bottom to the top of their group. Thank you.
Justin?
So, I have 2 kids in the Alexandria City Public Schools, a 7th grader at GW and a 4th grader right here at Mount Vernon, and my kids get a great education. We have a population in this city that is quite honestly unique in this region. 60% free and reduced lunch, over 30% English language learners. There's not a school system in this region that has that population. That's not an excuse. That is a challenge for us and an opportunity for us as a community. We celebrate that diversity and the diversity that our teachers serve every single day. Our kids are in the schools for 32.5 hours a week. We cannot hold our schools responsible for everything that happens in that building. That's why the city government has an important role. Where my focus has been is around preparedness. 20% of our kids start kindergarten without any early childhood education to speak of. That's unacceptable for a community such as ours. So my focus has been expanding early childhood education. To make sure that every child starts kindergarten ready to learn, has been working on improving the quality and availability of our after-school services to reinforce the learning that occurs during the day, and as we talked about earlier, has been addressing capacity. We have substandard facilities throughout this city. Last year, I pushed together, with unfortunately the mayor's opposition, $130 million of school facility investments. Those investments are going to address capacity and facilities all around our city, and I think that's vitally important to not only making sure that our kids are successful, but making sure they have good facilities to learn in. So thank you.
Allison, response?
Right. So once again, I certainly fully supported the city manager's budget that fully supported the superintendent's request for our schools. And so the extra money going to the 5.7 cent historic tax rate increase that my colleague initiated, that went towards unspecified needs. That's really not the way we do it. And so I really think, though, the important thing also to focus on is the fact that things really weren't being addressed as we went. The schools are now addressing their facility maintenance far better as we speak. This is a sea change in the last year. Some of you might know that. And that's their responsibility, and they're holding various people accountable. And
Time's
so I
up.
think that's a good change.
Got a list coming up here, so listen closely. School safety, obviously, more important than ever before. As the city's leader, what safety changes would you support? And I want to hear specifically whether you think we need to better fortify school entrances. Do we need metal detectors in any of our schools? Do we need more school resource officers? And do we need a better system of reporting concerns? Justin?
Well, first of all, I don't think we need to turn our schools into fortresses. Our schools should be palaces of learning, not armed fortresses to protect our kids. I don't think that is what is necessary. But we obviously need to take school safety seriously, and I've been a big supporter on the City Schools Committee of efforts to improve the training and response, as well as prevention efforts within our schools. I've also last year, or this year during our budget process, raised opportunities to work to get illegal guns off our streets, working with our police department, sheriff's department, Commonwealth attorney, to work within Virginia law, within existing Virginia law, to work to get guns off our streets. We need obviously action from Richmond to help expand those efforts, and I'm hopeful that with political changes in Richmond, we'll see more enlightened legislation there. But ultimately, we need to keep our kids safe, and I think we can do that without turning our schools into really armed fortresses. So I don't support that.
I was at a school about a month ago, I think it was MacArthur, and a third grader, young girl asked me, I said, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you want us to really focus on? And a lot of the kids had said environmental issues, which I was glad to hear. But one child said, I just want to be safe. I want to make sure we're safe. So I do not want us to have metal detectors at our schools. When I worked in Anacostia at the height of the crack wars, they had metal detectors. I did not ever want to see metal detectors in our schools. Our systems had already been hardened before the tragedy in Florida. Dr. Berlin put forward an idea that we should have an officer-friendly, a community officer going among the various elementary schools, actually. Right after the Florida tragedy, I had spoken many times with the Chief Brown and with Dr. Berlin, our superintendent, as well as with Mark Jinks, our city manager. We need to support, as I put forward a resolution for the council to sign, and we all signed it. I worked very hard on a resolution for common sense gun reform laws to push not only the state ledge in Richmond, but also the Congress. A lot of mayors have done that, and we've now done it. Also, I was proud to have attended and was very moved by the March for Our Lives in D.C. We need to stand up as a community for common sense gun reform laws.
Time's up. Alexandria's starting pay for police officers is at the bottom among neighboring jurisdictions, and the competition for young officers right now is fierce. In Alexandria, we are training and then losing good officers to other departments. Despite a plea from officers this year, when the budget came up, it's going to be studied a little longer. If elected, how big a priority would it be to increase that starting police pay next year, and how would you fund it? Allison?
Well, as soon as this came up, I asked our city manager, Mark Jinks, how this could have gotten by. It wasn't really focused on at the fall retreat, which we have each fall, and it wasn't part of the budget guidance. But from now on, I have asked that it always be part of the fall retreat in a big way, but more importantly, we're actually in the budget guidance so that we will never be facing this again and be in this situation. They have our backs 24/7, 365, and we should have theirs. I believe in fair compensation, and certainly as far as this cycle, all of us on the council are focused on addressing the compensation issues. Both of us were actually working simultaneously on putting together a package to address it. The vice mayor is virtually the same, but the vice mayors got the co-sponsors, and that's what we're going to support. It's a team effort, and I'm really proud that we're addressing it. Now in the fall, all the public safety work groups will be sitting down, as they've been doing so with the staff, and we've been getting great feedback that it's working well. But we need to see this through and make it right. and I'm fully committed to doing so and making sure that it doesn't happen again. We need to stay at the midpoint so that we stay competitive, but it's also, again, fair and the right thing to do.
Justin?
You know, this is one of these challenges where we're in very much an arms race with our neighbors for the best talent in our public safety agencies. And it costs us a lot to train new firefighters, new police officers, new sheriff's deputies. And when they walk out the door, we lose that investment. And so making sure that we fairly pay our public safety personnel so that they not only are attracted to come work here, but they stay here is a very important effort. And I was proud to put together a package this year that is going to go a long way to dealing with some of those challenges. We still have a little work to do in the fall to get there, but I think we have now set aside a significant amount of resource to try to address these issues. This is an important issue for us to compete regionally. And we also need to look at how we staff both those departments. We did a staffing study. We brought in the International Association of Chiefs of Police to do a staffing study for our police department. And we're in the process of implementing a whole series of recommendations about how we staff the department and how we deploy our resources to use them most effectively to protect our public safety. We're doing the same thing in the fire department, where we're in the process of implementing a new staffing model in the fire department to better utilize our resources and protect public safety in a better way around our community. And I think those are important initiatives and ones that, paired with the compensation changes, will protect our community long into the future. So,
Awesome. Response? No? All done with that one?
Yes.
Okay. A little breaking news I want to ask you about from the Washington Post, Patricia Sullivan. She has a story going up that a city task force is recommending roughly a $10,000 pay hike next year for the mayor and for the city council. You know, as you know, even though these are part-time positions, you're paid far below some other jurisdictions. So is it high time for a pay raise, or is it not the time for a pay raise? Justin, let me start with you.
You know, it's never a good time to discuss city council pay. Election years are an even better time to discuss city council pay. The fact is, council salaries have not been adjusted since 2003. That's a long time to go without adjusting the city council salary in any way, shape, or form. I think it is time to look at that. We did put together a task force of residents to make a recommendation, and I understand they've just made the recommendation. I haven't had a chance to review it all in detail. I'll certainly look at that and determine if it makes sense. State law requires that we adopt any pay increase for the council well in advance of the election, so that you guys can take it into account, and then it doesn't apply until the next council takes office. So I'll certainly look at their proposal and decide whether it makes sense, but it is probably time to adjust it, and I think probably doing it more regularly every 3 years in line with what we do for our general employees probably makes sense, but it shouldn't go that long where we have to do large adjustments all at once. So thank you.
Elsa?
I agree. No. I haven't had a chance to fully study the report. It just came out, and we've been focused on budgetary matters and other things. It is awkward right before the election cycle to be discussing this, and all I can say is that I love being the mayor, and I'm devoted to it. For me, it's full-time and really much more than that. I think that for those running for council or for mayor, it's, having whatever it is, $27,500 for council and $30,500 for mayor, right? That's what it is now, and that's what it's been for 15 years, is pretty low. But it's not really for me to judge. I wouldn't know where to set it per se. But it seems to me, and this will outlive us, frankly, whatever we do, it'll outsurvive us, because the last time was 15 years, and perhaps it should be every few years. But the bottom line is that if you think about it, the clerk of the council, not to pick on that role, but that person is paid about $120. The former clerk of the council was paid about $150, $154. The city manager is in the mid-200s. And I'm not suggesting that it should be at that level, but I do think that it bears thinking about when you're working more than full-time. Okay, the cowbell. So. Now
Any
we- now
follow-up
we
on that,
will.
Justin? No follow-up, okay. This isn't the most earth-shattering issue I'm going to ask you about, but it's one of high interest, lights at T.C. Williams football field. Justin, you get this one first. Support or oppose it, and explain.
I think I went first on the last one, so she goes
Did
first.
you? I
Yeah.
told you you could do that.
It's
You're
okay.
right.
I'm happy to go first. But
No, Allison, go ahead.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay, okay. Well, I think a lot of us have learned a great deal about the history of the school and the land and the neighborhood in recent years, and certainly in the last year or so. And I think it does bear remembering how we got to this point, and that the school in the early 60s, that the city went to the neighbors who had lived on that land with their families for generations, many for over 100 years. And the city came to that neighborhood, which was African American, and said, you need to move, and we're going to exercise eminent domain. They were paid for their homes, but apparently not for the land, which was quite larger than their homes. That is a shame, and I'm sure that there were other veiled comments or threats to their lives or jobs, frankly, because if they didn't move, it would have been made very difficult for them. And then so they moved, and now we have a number of African-American families on Woods Avenue and Woods Place. But the fact is that I don't think they were really treated fairly. And it's not right. But more to the point, in 2004, when the school was rebuilt, and there was a promise made in the early 60s that they wouldn't put up lights. Apparently, it was not written down.
Oh, that sounds like a no to lights. Am I correct?
Can I finish one sentence?
Well, you'll have a rebuttal.
Oh, we'll have a
You'll
rebuttal. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Justin.
So clearly, how TC came to be and how we got that property is something that I don't think anybody should be very proud of. As we move into kind of 2018 and work to fully leverage the investments that we make in our infrastructure, I think we need to use it. And right now, we have a field that we've spent a fair amount of money on that because of the lack of lights, we cannot utilize. Lighting technologies come a long way. I think we can erect lighting that doesn't impact quality of life. I'm willing to work with neighbors and figure out a compromise to ensure that we get the investment that we have made out of that school facility and are able to utilize it for what it is, which is a school field next to our only high school in the city.
So there was a condition, in 2004 when the school was rebuilt, there was a condition added to the DSUP that stated that there would be no lights. That was to follow up with regard to the promise made verbally in the early 60s. And the neighbors in that area took it to mean that they would be okay. I do think it's a quality of life question. It's not just the lights, although the lights are a big part of it. It's also the congestion and the noise that goes with it. I played all kinds of sports, but this is not the only school. Bishop Ireton and other schools that are quite close to neighbors would also see this. We can do this, and in terms of, I say that we...
Time's up, and I'm going to take that as a no. Okay.
Thank you. Yes,
So
that's
I've got, as we start to wind down here in the next 5 minutes or so, I've got a few questions that I don't think will require rebuttals. I think I just want you to each answer them, but they're a little bit more about who you are as public servants and elected leaders. And Justin, let me start with you. I mean, what do you see as your most important achievement or your greatest contribution to the city in your role as an elected official thus far?
Well, I'm proud of a lot of the accomplishments that we've been able to make working together as a team. I'm most proud of the historic infrastructure investments we've made over the last several years, investing in our roads, our sewers, our sidewalks, our school facilities all around this community. I'm proud that we're going to be renovating MacArthur Elementary. We're going to be dealing with George Mason Elementary. Those are resources that I built coalitions on the council to make sure we advance. I'm also proud of what we've been able to do around early childhood education. We know how important making sure that kids have a preschool education before they enter our schools is to their academic achievement, not just in kindergarten, but long into their academic future, as well as their job, their career attainment. And so I've been very proud of what we've been able to do to expand the public-private partnership for early childhood education in our community and provide more kids with that opportunity. And that's something that, if I'm privileged to be elected as your mayor, will work to ensure that every child has an opportunity to early childhood education in our community.
Allison, same question. What are you most proud of?
I'm extremely proud of the fact that we've been getting so much done so quickly in just 2.25 years. It's absolutely amazing. The sewers question had been neglected and sort of just sitting out there for so many years, almost 20 years, and we've really taken it on head on, and we now have a plan, finally. The schools, voting for 2 new schools in 1 year, that's a first. All kinds of infrastructure, repaving 130 roads in just 2 years. That's leaps and bounds ahead of what we had been doing. Renovating 2 libraries, one across the street, Duncan and Beatley, helping those 2 libraries do better. We're doing so much, but also the tree canopy. I said that it was a top priority, that we should go from an existing 34% tree canopy to 40% in a decade, and we went from planting about 300 trees over the course of 5 years to planting 350, and then now 650, and now 800 trees a year. So we're making leaps and bounds and partnering with all kinds of nonprofit developers and the community at large. So I'm proud of the fact that we're moving forward quickly on a whole host of issues.
And since we don't have rebuttals right now, we'll just go back and forth. So Justin, this one to you first. Describe to us your leadership. Allison, I'm sorry.
I did that.
I know. I'm going to start with you
Okay.
anyway, since we don't have rebuttals.
Yep.
What's your sense about your leadership style? What do you want voters to know about your leadership style?
My approach in council has always been collaborative, has been working with my colleagues to build coalitions, and I think that's what we've been able to do. Working in our community and working with my colleagues to build coalitions to move good progressive policy forward. So when it came to investing in our infrastructure, I was able to build a 6-vote majority on the council to make historic investments in our infrastructure. A lot of those capital investments the mayor talked about, the sewer infrastructure, the roads, those are funding that she voted against, and I was able to build coalitions on the council to make those investments, and I'm very, very proud of those. That's the approach I take to leadership. It's hearing my colleagues out, hearing the community out, and then putting together coalitions and compromises to move good policy forward.
Allison?
Well, that's perverting my vote again. The 130 repaving those lane miles, that was done before. And also, I fully supported the city manager's proposed budget, and that covered all those needs. And the unspecified needs by the 5.7-cent tax rate increase, your historic tax hike, was towards unspecified needs and was after those things that I mentioned, and the sewers are not necessarily part of that as well. And I think that you and I both know that. But as far as leadership, I really focus on the people of our city. We're a city government that needs to be for the people. City Hall should never be separate from the people. City Hall should be for the people. City Hall is the people. And I take that so seriously. Thank you. I take that so seriously. We need to be listening to you. And the community we have a small town feel, and we want to keep that. And I'm fighting for a livable Alexandria. And so I have a monthly coffee called Mayor on Your Corner. I've always had it. Even when I was vice mayor, I had council on your corner. I have Meet with the Mayor, where people can come in without an appointment, meet with me for 10 minutes about any subject once a month. I believe that we should not restrict public input during open mic, which was a 40-year tradition. I think that when people come and speak to us at council, we should listen and not be focused on whatever's in front of us on the dais.
Time's up. I want to squeeze in 2 quick questions before we get to closing statements. So let's just take a minute response on each of these, Allison. And the first one you might want to be short on. Let me start with this. I want to hear about one mistake each of you has made in the public service arena and what you learned from it. Allison?
Well, I'm sure I've made a number, not just one, I'm sure I've made a number of mistakes. I am very human. I wish we had a little bit of warning about that. I don't really have something right off the top of my head. I certainly try very hard to remember everyone's names and to answer every email in a timely manner. But I'm not perfect, and I will certainly try to do even better. But I certainly try very hard to read every email and answer it personally in a timely manner.
Justin?
So my kids, my wife, and the people who work for me at my day job remind me of my mistakes regularly on a daily basis. But in my public service career, I've certainly made a number of mistakes. I would identify a couple. First of all, during my first stint on council, during really the worst of the recession, one of the things we did was we deferred our capital investment. And I think in retrospect, that was a real mistake for us as a community. It was an easy way out to some very difficult budget years, and it's something that we've paid the price for going forward. And it's part of why I'm such an evangelist for making sure that we make these infrastructure investments, because I think deferring them raises taxes on the future, and I'm not going to be a part of that anymore. One of the other things that I think I've done that I would have again is, during my first stint on council, I thought we tried to kind of hide disagreements and not show them to the public. I think we should be very clear about what our perspectives are and be clear about the disagreements on the council. The public demands that and should see that. So, thank you.
And Justin, since you'll have the first closing, I'm going to do one more question and start it with Allison. Tell me something that you admire about your opponent.
Actually, there are a number of things. I admire his commitment to his family, and I certainly admire his discipline in terms of exercise. I don't actually jog, so but I do. I think that really his commitment to family, and I'm certainly committed to my family. But it's nice to see the children grow up.
Justin?
Joke's on you, I'm not as disciplined about running as I should be. So, I'll say this. I certainly admire the mayor's empathy. I think she is a very empathetic person, and I admire that about her. She's also very tireless in her service for our community, and I know she works hard and makes sure she's everywhere in our community, and I think that's certainly something to be admired, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, time for the closing remarks, and you will each have a minute for these, and Justin, you may go first.
So first of all, thank you, Julie, for moderating this and your commitment to our community. And thank to the Delray Business Association for putting this together and all the questions that were submitted. I think they were great questions. And thanks to all of you for being here and being interested in what's going to be an extremely important election. This is very much an inflection point for our community. This election has already gotten a fair amount of attention, and I think it's gotten attention because there's really two very different visions for our future that are on display in this election. My vision is that Alexandria should be a community where we not just talk about our progressive ideals, but we actually see them into reality. We invest in our kids, we invest in our infrastructure, and we assure that our economy is going to thrive long into the future. I look forward to the next few weeks as we continue knocking on doors all around this community, and I look forward to earning the honor of your vote on June 12th to be your next mayor. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Well, we as a city are certainly at a crossroads, and the question is, what kind of a community do we want to live in? There's a great deal at stake in this election for our beloved historic city, and we have an important choice to make, and I'm fighting for a livable Alexandria for all of us. For 2.5 years as your mayor, I've been moving our city forward on a host of issues while preserving and protecting the city that we love. If you want a leader who will fight to protect our neighborhoods and continue to fight, and who will pursue thoughtful, appropriate development, please stand with me. If you want a leader who will pursue who will fight for a sensible budget that doesn't place an undue burden on taxpayers, please stand with me. And if you want a leader who's committed to higher ethical standards, and a leader who builds trust and listens to the public, and who understands the public and reaches out to the public continuously, please stand with me. I'm certainly honored to serve as your mayor, and I ask for your vote on June 12th. Thank you.
I want to say thanks again to both of the candidates. Thanks to the Delray Business Association for hosting. Thanks to Zebra for live streaming this, so yeah, we can watch it again. Yay, Zebra. And thanks really to everybody in the audience. You made my job easy. We got a lot of great questions, and I'm sorry if I didn't get to yours, but thanks very much for being here tonight. Final reminder, absentee voting has begun. Primary date, June 12th. Thanks, everybody. Travel safely home.
And we just wanted to thank everybody, and especially Julie. We have some Delray swag.
All right.
You know, as I've been instructed to. Yeah. We have a lot of swag.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. That was awesome. Thank you very much.
Good job, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.